do you think that women accept less money for the same work as a man? Well, you may not think so, but 40% of employers do. They still regard women as a cheaper option. Here's another question for you. Do you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth on your CV when you're looking for a job? Well, if you do, you're in a minority, because 2/3 of employers believe that applicants routinely lie about their talents, their abilities and their qualifications. So if you're a guy, is there any point in going for a job which is also offered to women? And are you a fool if you don't gild the lily on your CV? To answer the questions such as these and all your job hunting queries, I'm joined by Peter Cosgrove, Director of CPL Resources. Peter, good morning.
Good morning.
So, that business of the CV, lying on the CV, do you think it's true? And you as an expert, can you detect the lie?
Well, I think the type of lie is the interesting thing here. I think everybody to some degree has to put their right foot forward here. And in the past, Irish people were probably guilty of not even selling themselves. And a CV is really a sales document. Someone's going to look at it for about 30 seconds. You want the best things to jump out.
So someone who's been babysitting, they put down personnel management.
Well, if you make it so they don't really understand what you're saying, or it's a bit too ridiculous. So, for instance, if people lie and say they're member of Mensa, and then the person asks them somewhat of a difficult question, a maths question, they don't answer it, there's a good easy way to find it out on somebody. So you have to be careful about what you do. But I do think people usually go the other way, that they don't actually push themselves hard enough on their CV.
Now, a break in a candidate's CV to quote unquote return to the home country turned out to be an 8-month spell in prison for fraud, and that was one lie that was told on a CV. What else have you uncovered?
Well, I mean, a lot of people will obviously say they have a degree if they don't have a degree.
And you don't routinely check up, and people don't bring in the cert with them.
No.
Because, I mean, you do get a diploma, a piece of parchment when you get a degree.
Yeah, and many companies do ask for this, but that would be less so as they're 10, 20 years in the job. I mean, the CEO of Yahoo just over a year ago was found out that she hadn't actually got a degree, and she said she had. He said he had. So things like that do get found out, but that's more if you're probably in a high-profile job. To be honest, a lot of those things, while you can lie about them in the CV, but the reality is when you get to the interview stage, they should be able to be picked out. And so it's very easy to lie in the CV, but that's a long way from saying you're going to get the job.
I mean, they don't do practical tests a lot of the times. Yeah. They don't say, oh, you're an IT expert, sit down there and write a bit of code for me.
Yeah.
So you employ someone who has a superficial knowledge of the business, spoofs their way into the job, and then they can't do it.
Yeah, and to be honest, we would say to most employers that just doing an interview is not a great way to hire, because exactly that, it's a 45-minute performance, which actually, and even if they do it a couple of times, really doesn't tell you what they're good at. So there's two ways of doing that. One, they could do some tests. So actually a person who writes code, you could actually get them to write code. But better still, and the thing that people do not do who are employers, they don't actually take references. It's amazing. And the reference they do take is generally a reference which is more of a tick box exercise, because they've already decided to hire.
I mean, people who are asked to write references, and if someone is really an appalling employee, they can't do that anymore.
No,
they can't write down, do not employ Mary, because she's lazy, she's unreliable, she's dishonest. You can't write that in a reference anymore.
You're right, Pat, but I think in Ireland, you're never too far away from someone who can tell you the truth. And any reference I take would be an unofficial reference. I've no interest.
It would be a verbal reference. It would never be committed to email or paper.
Most employers, when it's on, and when you've actually got a reference written on paper, they ignore it, because the fact is someone's written something for you, and that's not what you want.
What do you have to disclose on your CV, or is it all about what you choose? I mean, for example, do you have to give your age?
You don't have to give your age. But interestingly, I would tell most people to give your age, because actually you might as well. When people say, oh, I don't want to give my age because I may not get the interview, the reality is if they don't want to interview because you're old, which they're not allowed to do, but I'm just saying that reality happens, they're just going to make that decision anyway. You might as well put your best foot forward and say, look, so a lot of people say to me, oh, I'm getting discriminated because I'm old. You go, well, other people get discriminated because they don't have a degree. Other people get discriminated because they're too young. Everybody to some degree does, because based on personal
But you're not under the law allowed to age discriminate.
No, you're not, absolutely not.
If someone is gay, for example, you can't discriminate on that basis either.
No.
Now, suppose someone is transgender and comes in and is wearing the business suit for the interview, and then on the first day in work they come in a flowery dress.
Well, thankfully it hasn't happened very often, but the first thing
what would you do though? I mean,
the first thing, there's nothing you can do, but what I would say in that situation is even that person who's doing that, they are by some stage concealing something about themselves, that they're going to be slightly different on their first day than they are at interview. A question quite similar to that, which is, if I'm pregnant, should I tell them? And there's absolutely no You don't have to tell your employer. But we would always say, take the offer of the job and then say, before you start the job, by the way, I'm pregnant. So you do, because people don't want a surprise when you start, because there's a little bit of a contract, a psychological contract with your employer as well, that you want to be seen.
But isn't that a huge difficulty? I mean, you say you're looking for, in a small firm, maybe with 2 or 3 employees, you're looking for an employee and you offer them the job and they're absolutely perfect for it. And they say, by the way, I will be missing for 6 months in 4 months' time.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is if you don't tell them, and then after 4 months when you do happen, they're going to be very upset with you anyway, and they may not be the employer you wanted anyway. So my view is a good employer will absolutely stand by it, because they don't hire someone for 4 months, they hire them for the longer term.
Now, you say that women have, first of all, they're poor at negotiating, and they have a diminished view of their own value compared to men.
Well, that's what the clients in the CPL survey say, so it wouldn't be myself. But one of the reasons for that is, I think sometimes employers realise that a lot of women do come back, the research shows, to the workplace and take a job that's actually more suitable to ours. So actually some of the reasons that women will be seen to be on lower pay is actually because they could do a job that is much bigger than the job they're doing, but they choose to do something on a part-time basis because it might suit them for a number of years.
And also, I've come across cases where women will not go for the so-called big job because they want the flexibility of meeting the demands that child rearing sometimes throws up.
There's that. There's also just the statistics which show some of the jobs in the investment banking sector, CEO jobs, some of the senior jobs in a lot of industries are still male-dominated. So that is just a reality, that there are less women in those positions. So factually, it is true to say that there are men in higher paid positions.
But the business of employers actually looking at 2 people, a man and a woman, say in their mid to late 20s, looking for the same job, they figure the woman will do it for less.
Yeah, I think that to me is less so. It depends now on the marketplace you're going. In my marketplace, we'd actually be about 60 to 70% female, so it definitely isn't the case there. And we've a female CEO. But I think in some markets, people believe, and I think what they hear is, and this is probably to some degree true, men have an overinflated view often of what they're like. And misplaced
in every
confidence.
Aspect of
Possibly. But actually, interestingly, when you're looking for things like a pay rise or something like that, you do actually have to push it. In many organisations, if you don't ask, you will get nothing. And actually, there's a view that men will actually be a little bit more cocksure about that and believe they should get more than they should.
Now, the CV and the presentation of the CV, how important is it to have, quote, a good CV? And 20 pages doesn't mean necessarily a good CV.
Yeah, I mean, it's critical. But I would say, look at it from the employer's point of view. They're only going to look at it for 30 or 45 seconds. I would say forget about the number of pages, less than 800 words, because people can do anything with pages by making font 4 or squashing it up. I know I've seen people write 2 pages, but it could still be War and Peace. So 800 words, because they don't want to read a lot. They want to read the key things.
But the facts. They want the facts, your name, address, your qualifications, your employment history.
Yeah, but the most important thing is they really don't care too much about all of your employment history. They care about what you did well. Not about what you did well. And that's the critical difference. 90% of CVs is what you did in the job. And as I always said, someone could do your job and got fired after a year for every gross misconduct reason, but they can still write down all the things they did.
My daughter now dumbs down her experience and abilities, having once been told she is overqualified.
No, I wouldn't do that. There's many reasons people don't hire employees, and often it's easier to make up an excuse than to give the real one. That's the reality. Irish people aren't very good at giving bad news. You'll hear you're not the right strategic fit for the organisation. You'll hear you're overqualified. You'll hear lots of culturally.
So in other words, they're saying no.
They're saying, a lot of people are saying no, but you know what? They might be saying no because actually they found someone internally, or they didn't actually hire the position. And we're not great at giving very specific feedback. So people tell me all the time, I'm getting this feedback.
But isn't there a genuine fear that someone is overqualified? You have a job, maybe organising the taxi rank, and the person has a PhD in applied mathematics. Now, of course, they'll be able to organise the taxi rank, but they'll be bored solid.
Yeah. The key question is for that person is why they want to do the job. So I always say to anybody,
there's no market for PhDs at the moment, so they want
absolutely.
money.
So they turn around and say, the reason you don't think I'll want this job is you think I'll leave after 6 months because I'm overqualified. But I'm actually guaranteeing I'm here for the next 2 years. I need the money, and this is why I'm doing it. If you address the issue up front, and that's usually the problem, people are thinking, oh, this person just wants my job, or this person isn't going to stay. So if there are reasons why you're taking a job that don't seem to make sense on paper, you need to bring them up.
You have to say, look, I'm only in this as a stopgap, but I promise you I will I'll organise that taxi rank and I'll set up a system that will work into the future.
Yeah, I know a lady who's a financial controller. She took a job as a financial accountant. They said, why would you want this job? For the next 3 or 4 years, she said, I want to be near the school. I want to see my kid every day and I want to leave at 5:30. You will only get me till 5:30. I will do a great job. I want to do this for 4 years because of location.
I know I won't have to take work home with me.
So they were delighted. But if she hadn't said that, they would have said, no, you'll leave in 6 months and we won't take you.
Hi there. As a teacher, I've seen a few people who've spoofed their way into a job, and the principal, after sitting in on their classes, did not renew their contract at the end of the year. It's the review of the employee after the interview that's key to establishing competence. Now, how can employers do that? Can they actually put down a trial period in a job?
Yeah.
Can they say, OK, there'll be a review after 6 months, and if either of us feel it's not right for us, we can walk away? Can you do that under employment law?
Yeah, every job has a probation period. Every job. The company decides how long that probation period is going to be. In most corporates now, it's about 3 to 6 months. So that gives you absolutely enough amount of time if you really go, hang on, this person really doesn't know what they're doing. And that will become clear if somebody has blagged their way into a job, but they literally don't know how to use the IT system or have never taught before. Because that'll come up in weeks. And actually, the interesting people...
Because you may walk in and the IT system is totally different to anything you've experienced. But if you've done it once, learned it once, you can learn the new system relatively quickly. And if you don't...
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, Pat, because most employers, however much they care about the skills, the key thing they care about is the attitude of the person. Someone who's really hungry and desiring. Now, obviously, you have to have a base level of skills, but there's no point saying I can do the job if you don't really want to do it and you're not motivated.
Why do men feel free to speak negatively about other men but are afraid of their lives to say anything negative about women? That's from Jerry. I mean, is that political correctness gone wrong, that you can criticise your mates, the lads around the office, but if you do criticise someone of the opposite gender, you're in trouble? Sexism. I think the key thing is you shouldn't be criticising a person, you should be criticising the behaviour. So that's from everything from a 2-year-old daughter up to someone in work. So when you praise somebody, you don't praise them for being a great person, you praise them for doing something good, because therefore you can also give them feedback for something they didn't do well, rather than saying, well, hang on, yesterday was great, now I'm terrible. Praise the behaviour or give feedback on the behaviour, not on the person. You're a lovely person, but you're a lousy employee. Another one. Please ask your job expert about ageism. I've applied for jobs I could do with my eyes closed and not even been given an interview. I'm 62. I've been a medical secretary for years and I'm only applying for doctors' receptionist jobs. That's from Neve.
Yeah, there is absolutely reasons why you may not get the job, but it may be nothing to do with your age. And that's the first thing. If there's an assumption that I'm not getting the job because someone's ageist. You may not be getting the job because there's other people who are better qualified. You may not be getting the job because people will do it for cheaper. I'm just saying that's the first thing to always realise.
But you may also be not getting it because you're 62.
So the first thing you do is you work out, well, hang on, is this the only reason? Am I being very honest? And secondly, then you think, what can I do to counter this? Ageism, if people believe it, it's you don't know how technology works. You'd never know what the word social media means. You know, you're not going to be able to do it as quick as someone younger. You have to prove that all the assumptions they have about why you can't do the job, you show them you can.
My daughter is a nurse, brilliant worker, but fails every interview. She has a permanent post but wants to change jobs. And a number of people say that. I know I can do the job, but put me in front of an interview board and I fall to pieces.
Interviews are very similar to presentations, which is if the first time you've ever presented, you did it brilliantly, you're 1 in a million. When you do an interview, I can guarantee the first question is going to be run me through your CV. They're going to ask you a few examples. They're going to ask you your strengths. They're going to ask you 1 or 2 other questions.
So you can prepare.
Then you can absolutely prepare. But here's preparation. Preparation is actually speaking out loud or speaking into an iPhone and then watching the results. Most people just do it in there and go, yeah, I know how to answer that one. I know how to answer that one.
But they don't actually rehearse.
No, they never actually sit in front of a mirror, watch themselves because they go, oh, that's a bit awkward. As I say, that's awkward, but it's not as awkward as bombing the interview. So the practice is actually painfully boring, and the people who prep a lot will do a lot better.
Interview success boils down to 3 things. This is from Nicola in Glasnevin. 1, can you do the job? 2, will you do the job? And 3, will you fit in? Candidates only have control over the first 2.
Well, yes, but the third one, will you fit in, is quite psychological. The 4 things that people spot in the first minute are, do you smile? Do you have eye contact? How you shake their hand, and how are you dressed? And that is in the first 30 seconds. That's the first impression feel. And while you can't get the job in that 30 seconds, I can guarantee if you've a clammy handshake, or you're looking at the floor, or you're dressed in an outlandish suit, you might actually fail the interview in the first 30 seconds.
I never put my address on job applications. Irish people are So obsessed with where you grew up and what college you went to. Despite having 2 master's degrees and great work experience, I've had comments made at interview about my background. So Barbara, is that still the case, that, you know, which school you went to and what part of the city
I'll never say no, because that's human behaviour. But I don't believe it's as prevalent as it used to be. People would much more care about, can you do a great job for them and can you solve a problem, than where you're from. So I don't believe that is the case. But the main thing is, if you presume that of every interview, my challenge is to job seekers is sometimes they can have a little bit of a chip in the shoulder about that this is the case. And often it's nothing to do with that. It's just something else.
Do you ask about money at the interview, or is that seen as too pushy, or would they expect you to say, okay, what's the job worth?
No, I always say the best time to talk about money is when they want you. When you're interviewing at first stage, second stage, you want the job. So you don't ask about money until they're suddenly interested in you. So everything changes when they're suddenly interested in you, and then you can talk money. That's the best time to do it.
When you know they're
interested in you.
Now, the question of where the jobs are at the moment, I mean, everyone's talking about the rising tide, however slowly it's rising, and many boats rising with it. What's your experience out there in the marketplace?
We've seen in a lot of areas. So healthcare, nursing, radiography, those sort of jobs. Technology is huge. Pharmaceutical is still very strong.
But when you talk about those medical jobs, I mean, the HSE is in theory not hiring.
Yeah, there's jobs outside that, but I mean, like medical can be medical affairs jobs, pharmacovigilance. There's lots of pharmaceutical companies, where lots of people with a doctor and nursing background end up going into the corporate sector as well. And there's often fixed term contracts as well. When they say they're not hiring for permanent jobs, but there's still lots of jobs out there. Multilingual jobs, so lots of people who have a second language. Honestly, sales is very strong, because now that we're starting to grow again, any company that has a sales and marketing background, the key thing I'd say to anybody is always link it to what the trends are at the moment. So the trends are around everything's going to be on mobile phones, everything's going to be around social media, or lots of things. So you have to keep up with what the trends are in whatever job you're doing.
So if people went on to your website, what is it, CPL.ie?
Yeah, there'd be about 2,500 jobs there.
2,500 jobs?
Yeah.
And the medical,
everything from light industrial, warehouse, through to office support, to senior jobs in banking, finance, to science, technology, pretty much across the spectrum in Ireland.
And these are real jobs, and they're out there, and they're available now.
Real jobs out there, but no employer is hiring as easily as they did before. That's the key thing. That they will put you through your paces.
Yeah, so expect that.
Yes,
and it's not just you.
No, it's
what
everybody.
They're doing to everybody.
Absolutely.
Peter Cosgrove, Director of CPL Resources, thank you very much for joining us.